Welcome to Connected Care Education. Today we are going to look at Unit 002, Principles and Values of Health and Social Care Children. Unit 002, Outcome 7, Understanding the Importance of Effective Communication in Health and Social Care. The importance of effective communication for the well-being of children and young people. Introduction. Health and social care workers provide a range of information to children and young people who use services to enable them to understand the support that is available to meet their needs. Exchanging information is important in order to develop an understanding of the needs of an individual, to support individuals requiring the care and improve the quality of the service provision. So why is clear and effective communication important? Health and social care workers will establish many different relationships across the sector, some of which will be formal and others more informal. Two-way communication is required to form relationships and establish the boundaries. It will help to ensure that everyone concerned understands the purpose of the relationship and what they are aiming to achieve. The relationships between workers and children and young people accessing services and between colleagues have an impact on the ability to provide effective care and support. Respect for each other can be developed through the use of good communication. Getting to know children and young people by talking and listening to them will enable carers to develop an understanding and awareness which will lead to stronger relationships in the long term. Positive relationships are developed between workers and children and young people when they communicate effectively and trust is established. In order to maintain effective support and achieve success, each individual involved in a relationship should know clearly what their responsibilities are and what the other individual's expectations are. Please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 1. Why is good communication important? Key features of effective communication. Features of effective communication. Verbal communication is an important method of communication between carers and children and young people. Through regular conversations, ideas can be exchanged and decisions can be made through a process of speaking and listening. Communication is therefore a two-way process. Ideas can be exchanged and decisions made there and then. If there is any confusion about what has been said, this can be clarified at the time so that everyone knows and understands exactly what has happened or is going to happen in the future. Children and young people will be able to find out about the care or support they need or will be needing in the future. Instructions can be given to their other health and social care workers so that they know what their duties are. In addition, activities can be carried out and problems solved using an appropriate method of communication for the child or young person. Co-production relies upon effective communication within teams. Please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 2, Features of Effective Communication. Skills that are needed to communicate effectively. How to communicate effectively. Within health and social care practice, we sometimes need to adapt our method of communication to meet the needs of the child or young person we care for. We need to ensure we speak clearly and prevent using jargon or terminology that may be difficult for the individual to understand. Active listening helps to maximise the communication interaction. It is important to show that workers are listening to the child or young person and that they have heard and understood what has been said. Using reassuring smiles and eye contact ensures that children and young people understand that workers are interested in what is being said. Workers should use open body language and using gestures can also be helpful. Showing interest in what is being said encourages children and young people to communicate more and can improve the level of detail they are prepared to give. Communication should not be rushed, as this may make the individual feel that they are not important or that there is little respect for them. Please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 3, How to communicate effectively. How to find out a child's communication and language needs, wishes and preferences. Communication and language needs, wishes and preferences. Only about 10% of our communication is actually spoken, and through this two-way process of communication, health and social care workers are able to work with children and young people and their families in order to ascertain what their needs are and what can be put in place to support them. During this process, it is important that the child or young person is allowed to speak freely and is not overly questioned, as this can be overwhelming. Health and social care workers need to adapt their communication style and techniques in order to ascertain information without putting the children and young people under stress. When aiming to discover how a child or young person wishes to communicate, it is important to choose the right moment and the right place. If something needs to be discussed in private with an individual, it is vital to ensure that the choice of venue is private and that no one feels uncomfortable about the possibility of being overheard. Whilst friends and families can be of assistance, advocacy services can be requested to help in this process. Please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 4. How to find out an individual's communication and language needs, wishes and preferences. How the stage of development of a child or young person will impact upon their communication skills. Stage of development. Children will learn to communicate by watching and listening to their parents and carers, mimicking their words and actions. The more we communicate with children, the more likely they will develop these skills. To communicate effectively, it is important to take account of culture and context. For example, where English is an additional language. Many socioeconomic factors can play a part in a child or young person's development, including parental and environmental influences. Poor communication skills can result in other areas of development being affected, including not being able to socialise, developing and maintaining friendships, challenge and struggle with oracy and written tasks, resulting in confidence and self-esteem issues. Becoming frustrated due to being unable to express oneself can also be emotionally upsetting. Consider the needs of children you work with or know. How has their communication development been affected by different factors? Potential barriers to effective communication and ways to address these. Barriers to good communication. Whichever way we choose to communicate, we must try to ensure that children and young people who are receiving information can fully understand the information and make appropriate responses demonstrating their understanding. There may be times when a message is misinterpreted because barriers to the communication process have not been addressed. These barriers might include environmental, language, sensory loss, cultural. At times, communication barriers can be created because children and young people misunderstand or misinterpret messages as they are not confident using different methods of communication. This may be because they haven't been given the opportunity or due to their age and stage of development. For example, it can be easy to misinterpret a letter, telephone call, text message or email, as these types of communication don't contain any body language to support and reinforce them. Being able to communicate face-to-face can provide visual clues of what information is being communicated. Environmental barriers. A health and social care environment can be noisy, distracting and confusing at times. It is important that health and social care workers recognise this and reduce any background noise to a minimum. How often are children and young people spoken to in a room full of other very noisy children and young people, for example? Consider the effect you think this will have on their ability to concentrate on or converse with others. Arrangements should be made to have quieter spaces to promote effective communication when necessary. It is also important that the worker ensures that the environment is freely accessible and that the setting up of play areas encourages children and young people to interact with each other. This will not only encourage conversation between carers and children and young people, but will also enable them to socialise with others. Language and cultural barriers. Language and cultural barriers that may hinder the communication process. If a child or young person dominates the communication process, communicating becomes a one-way process and responses from the individuals are hindered. If an individual talks too much about themselves, then the topic or focus of the communication changes. Swearing may be powerful at times, but it does not usually appeal to others. Using jargon, people often use words that belong exclusively to their area of expertise. Using patronising or condescending words, tone or behaviour will make children or young people and their families feel angry and defensive. Using threats, implied or explicit, to persuade a child or young person into doing something they don't want to do. Being callous, insensitive or unaware of own feelings and the feelings of others. Please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 5, Language and Cultural Barriers. Sensory impairment. Health and social care workers can assist children and young people who have visual impairment by making sure that their eyesight is tested regularly. They can assist in supporting the child or young person and their parents and carers to be able to make and attend appointments, ensure that their spectacles are clean and worn properly, and that their possessions are kept in a safe, familiar place. A worker can also learn the correct way to guide and assist a partially sighted child or young person while they are walking and find out what visual aids are available. Workers can support children and young people with hearing impairment by making sure their hearing is tested regularly, that their hearing aid is clean and worn properly, and that the battery is not flat. A worker can also learn the correct way to replace a hearing aid battery. Overcoming barriers to communication. As a health and social care worker, it is important to make sure the physical environment is quiet, well lit, warm and comfortable. It is also important to know and understand how children and young people need to communicate and use a form of their own preferred communication. If appropriate, the individual may wish to use communication aids or human aids such as advocates, interpreters, translators and signers. Health and social care workers should speak clearly, use appropriate body language and actively listen to show that they are interested and are trying to understand what they are being told. It is also important that they check that the child or young person understands them correctly and that they can confirm that the message has been understood by asking the individual to relay back what was said. Workers need to become familiar with the needs of the children and young people who have different cultural beliefs. They need to ensure that they are well informed of cultural practices and also how to support a child or young person to communicate in their preferred language, making every effort to provide resources and adapt communication methods to meet individual needs. Please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 6, Overcoming Barriers to Communication Approaches. And finally, please pause the video here and complete worksheet Learning Outcome 7, Worksheet 7, Overcoming Barriers to Communication Assessment.